Kaimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Kaimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Kaimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna.
Pakardia is a massive island in the southeast corner of the known world. Its people are welcoming to hosts at times, but protective of their home and often seen as reclusive. While they are on perhaps the best terms with the assembly out of any Chimeran faction, the reincarnation cycle of their religion demands the dead be returned to the island's soil, so they are reluctant to let specimens leave the island for study. This means there's difficulty in peer review and verification of statements made during field work, and has resulted in a lot of uncertainty and misconceptions about the island's native flora and fauna. This month, we will meet 4 species endemic to Pakardia and its immediate neighboring islands. $1.5 million years ago, calamity came to Pakardia. As the axial tilt of the planet dramatically reduced, the cold latitudes of Kaimere got colder and the warmer regions got hotter. This made Pakardia quite cool, and the resulting extinctions contributed to the triggering of a harvest. To make matters worse, the low sea levels, as the increasingly colder polar region trapped ice, and passage from the mainland to Pakardia through Kadan became suddenly quite viable. This tilt and its consequences didn't last long, but the influx of mainland and harvested fauna devastated the local ecology of Pakardia. Fossil surveys of Pakardia's prehistory are few and far between, but it paints a picture of staggering turnover. There are many species of endemic megafauna, or animals over 50 kilos, on Pakardia, but only a few can claim ancestry prior to this major interchange. Some swam earlier, like the simimorph sloths and many animals which are now extinct, but most megafauna seem to have arrived 1.5 million years ago. When the Assembly discuss Pakardia's native fauna, they mean those who inhabited the island prior to these first migrants and harvested animals. While there are many small animals befitting this native description, only a few megafauna qualify. Largest of these is the urek. This animal is generally said by the indigenous peoples of Pakardia to be an enormous bird. The largest roosters stand well over 2 meters at the hip and can weigh just under 1.5 tons. Hens are typically around half this size. They are generally classified as domesticated both for riding and settlement defense, though wild urekil are readily tamed and bred within this domesticated stock, so their status as a true domesticate is debatable. The urek is an omnivore. Large fruit, cones, nuts, and other mast are their preferred food, but these are often only available seasonally. Many trees shed seeds together once every few years, which is a great boon when it comes, but the irregularity prevents specialty. When seeds are not available, their preferences wane, and they take on just about any sapling, leaf, floating wetland vegetation, fern, or cycad. Though they prefer vegetation, they will peck at a carcass and readily hunt small game to be swallowed whole. Their toothless beaks are powerful and versatile tools. The urek is highly intelligent, among the most intelligent dinosaurs of Kaimere. This is most famously a problem with the chicks, called memos by the Pakardiant, who have a penchant for getting into no shortage of trouble. They harass other livestock, steal anything shiny, tear open and feast on crops, and see any closed door as a personal challenge. Once they reach adolescence, they begin to settle down as long as they are kept in line by the flock, and adults are much more calm. It is conventional Pakardian wisdom that the most difficult chicks grow up to be the most amiable and reliable adults. They never lose their clever curiosity even when they calm, and the stoic adults who are well cared for often bring out a playful side with their handlers now and then. The urek is a coelurosaurian theropod. It is reliably placed within the endemic Chimeran clade Hippoelectriona. The clade includes several far smaller species on a few Kaline islands, and a much wider diversity in Kaishel, including the continent's largest predator, the kettlerek. The phylogeny of this clade and where they fit within Coelurosauria, however, is far less certain. They are often considered to be the descendants of very basal oviraptorosaurs introduced in Kaimere likely during the Jurassic, though this classification sensu stricto is contentious. For various anatomical features, and the fact that their ancestors would have been taken long before our best understood members of the given clades, arguments in the assembly favor instead that they are therizinosaurs, ornithomimosaurs, alverosaurs, and several other coelurosaur groups. It has even been proposed that they are extremely derived toothless coelophosaurs, another clade endemic to Kaimere. Our earliest confident or even contentious members of each of these clades show up long after they theoretically would have diverged from a common ancestor, and this hypothetical ancestor of the Hippoelectrions would have likely been harvested sometime amidst this mess in the middle. This lineage itself has a fairly shoddy history in Chimere's fossil record, so that side of the portal doesn't offer many answers either. It is unlikely that this will be resolved anytime soon. If they technically belong to any of our more familiar coelurosaur clades, it would only be in their most ancient members, and most in the assembly just stick to calling them Hippoelectriona, as that at least can be said with confidence. The urek is a socially complex animal. Generally speaking, a flock of 5 to 10 related females will be led by a matron hen. The matron is usually the eldest female, though not always. Sometimes size or even personality can alter the status quo. Like chickens, there is a pecking order. The social order is strictly and regularly reinforced. Dominant females peck at their subordinates. Even the most subordinate hens are usually not abused, though it can get extreme in some cases. Often, several flocks in an area will be in contact with each other, forming large if loose herds, generally with at least distant familial relationships within the hens. Dominant hens bond close within their flock, while subordinates instead may drift between flocks in the general herd. Sometimes these herds will see each other a few times a day, while at other times they may go months without contact. Roosters live within flocks and have their own distinct pecking order. While as many as 4 related males can share a flock, only the dominant male regularly mates with the hens, and he will only allow his subordinates to court the most subordinate members of the flock. Males with a few companions have a lot more success, which may be his incentive to let his lesser companions court. That said, even subordinate hens favor the dominant rooster, so them being allowed to court does not mean that they get to mate. While the matron hen is generally considered the head of the flock and she decides where they nest, the dominant male will often decide where the flock travels and forages in more day-to-day matters. The dominant male tends to act as a mediator. He isn't part of the pecking order, but will position himself between hens if a fight breaks out. This also endears himself to his hens. Usually roosters are only accepted into a flock if the matron accepts him, but once he's established, it doesn't really matter if they get along so as long as the rest of the hens approve of him. While males are notoriously violent in the mating season, which we'll get to in a moment, hens are much more violent with each other day to day. Roosters have brief dominance clashes with strangers. Hens will hold grudges and go for the kill for rivals or their young in extreme cases. The subordinate males are sometimes pecked at by dominant males, and occasionally themselves peck at hens, but usually males are a lot more amiable to the others in the flock than hens are. All this changes when the mating season comes. Hens like to nest near other flocks. After all, there's safety in numbers. However, this can lead to competition not only with other hens, but between roosters. Dominant roosters must defend their hens from other flocks, and also the claim to mating rights. Not only do other roosters from other flocks try to court their hens, transient roosters come through these congregations looking to find love without all the tiresome commitment of mediating a flock. Subordinate male allies to the dominant rooster are a tremendous asset in these engagements. When roosters do clash, it can escalate to severe injury and even death. Their beaks and kicks are powerful, but the worst damage comes from the long wrist spurs and claws on their very muscular arms. It's rare for roosters to out-kill one another in these fights, but the injuries sustained in these fights can easily become infected and result in death not long after. Urek may squabble within the flock, but they quickly form ranks when danger approaches. Predators are mobbed and killed when they get too close. A large rooster may not have an easy fight against a weochetu'ka or oritaku, but both predators have been reportedly killed by these great birds. Their close guarding of nests and young, especially until the next clutches are laid, are often suggested as how this animal survived the mass influx of mustelids and other small nest raiders 1.5 million years ago, an event which seems to have spelled doom for many native Pakardian dinosaurs. Small mammals are especially subject to the Urek's vitriol, and they are well documented to chase down and kill mustelids in particular whenever they are sighted. This ferocity in both hens and roosters has of course earned them the admiration of the Pakardiant. If we celebrate the ferocity of a 1.5 ton kilogram rooster, you can imagine the hype the Pakardiant feel about the roosters doing the same acts at almost 1.5 tons. Horses have become more favored mounts in some Confederacy territories, and the trocatul is preferred for a lot of overland travel for short distances, but when it comes to riding into battle, being mounted on an Urek rooster is without rivalry. They are also favored for distance travel throughout Pakardia. While they may not be as fast as a horse or agile as a trocatul, not only can an Urek cover more ground in a day at a steady pace, they can feed themselves on the road, and also have far more reliable defenses against Pakardia's predators. Weochetu'ka and oritaku are the only predators large enough to dare challenge a rooster, and even they rarely press an attack against a coordinated defense. While Urek cannot carry much weight and aren't ideal for swift daily travel, if you're going into Pakardia's interior or riding into battle, there's no better mount you could hope for. Cheers to David for sponsoring this series. We had originally planned a large episode on the Jurassic Islands, focusing on fauna I was going to have in a story in the next anthology, but as that story was moved to a later book, doing a showcase on 4 Pakardian dinosaurs was his next suggestion, and I was elated to run with it. In this series, we will learn more about the Urek and the watipetun, or turtle pig, 2 animals descended from ancestors which have been in Pakardia since it was connected to the polar continent, and 2 fairly recent migrants, the weochetu'ka and jurazhent. We'd originally planned the oritaku to get an episode, but since they're getting a ballad in a couple years, I decided to instead give the highlight to the watipetun, which I'm very grateful for. Thanks again to David, to my Patreon patrons for your support, and thank you for watching. Cheers, folks!